Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and welcome to Metagame Mondays. Today we're going to be discussing how to beat Stall. We're going to be going over all the different Pokemon that can fit on Stall teams, because what's most important about beating Stall is understanding how Stall functions and how people play Stall. Then we're going to be going over some sample replays of how I feel it is appropriate for players to approach playing Stall teams. In doing so, we're going to be able to not only understand what Stall is and how people use it, but also how to play against it. So if you guys are interested in how to improve your ladder game and how to beat Stall, then definitely guys, keep watching this video. Okay, so the first thing is first, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in the Metagame Monday series. It's going to be on my channel every single week. We're going to discuss another topic. Last week we discussed hyper offense in SSU, and this week, as you see, we're going over all things Stall related. So first and foremost, I've played Stall countless times. I'm going to go through replays of me using it and playing against it later on in this video, but I noticed something that a friend Eo Mortis taught me. Really, the best way to understand how to play Stall and longer games in general against balanced teams is to play with those type of teams, understand how they function. You can put so much on paper, and I could explain so much to you guys over the course of this video, which I'm going to try and do, but sometimes what cannot be compensated for is first-hand experience, getting that practical edge on the opposition. Because you're going to soon have instincts that are going to enable you to really play long sequences much better than you previously would have. And because of this, I view this kind of lesson as just a precursor to first-hand experience. So I can tell you guys all of this, and it's definitely going to help you improve at playing against Stall teams. It's going to give you fundamentals, it's going to leave you informed, and on top of that, it might even give you some really practical examples later on in the video. But that can't do all the legwork. You still have to click the right buttons. You still have to play the game as if you were the one taking down Stall if you were to face Stall on the ladder, or even more importantly, in tournaments against competent players who know how to pilot Stall. Because of this, I'm going to suggest that all of you guys try and play bulkier teams than your norm if you want to take a serious effort at getting better against Stall. If you're a more casual player, just a ladder player, maybe listen to my tips and just adapting your offensive teams or your balanced teams accordingly could help you go a long way in combating Stall. But if you're someone that's dedicated to the long haul, to playing competitive Pokemon at a high level and being a well-rounded player, then my personal recommendation would be to trying out some bulkier teams, not necessarily to make them define your playstyle or be what you use most frequently, although if you like them, then of course that's fine too. But more importantly, to familiarize yourself with the ins and outs, how those teams function, and what makes them kind of, get on the back foot and really struggle. So because of this, we need to understand what Stall teams use. We're going to be breaking it down into some categories. First and foremost, we're going to discuss hazards and removal. These two are the most important categories in my opinion, because despite the invention of heavy-duty boots, controlling the hazard game is still important for Stall. Previously, in generations 5, 6, and 7, the most important functionality of Stall was to have the hazard game in control. Teams oftentimes ran a Magic Punch used like Mega Sableye in conjunction with a Defogger or Rapid Spinners, or even 2 to 3 different removals. Whereas on balanced teams, you seldom see more than one removal. Even on teams with Volcarona, you might only see one in those generations. But in this generation, at least heavy-duty boots can help, as you could run it on things like your Mandibuzz or Rotom Heat, Togekiss, Avalugg, just Pokemon on your screen that I just named right off the top of my head. But you still can't run that on every single Pokemon unless you're, going for some gimmick, I guess. Because of that, you're going to have Pokemon that are susceptible to hazards, or you're going to have strategies that want to kind of immunize yourself to hazards. And controlling the hazard game not only helps you in making sure that your switches and your defensive maneuvers are not punished by taking consistent residual damage that they can exploit, but also, if you're forcing them to make pivots to try and get their offensive options in, setting up hazards to help cripple them and eventually make progress, as you do need to win the game with Stall. You can't just sit there and wall everything. If you bring 6 synergetic walls, you can potentially wall every single Pokemon in metagame, barring rare exception or specific combinations, and that could be great, but if teams have any degree of bulk or, longevity to them, then they can outlast you with those walls, because walls only do so much. The fact of the matter is that I don't have any category here for walls. All these Pokemon are tankier Pokemon that you can consider walls, yes, but just using straight up walls and just sitting there and switching isn't going to do anything. That's not going to win you the game. You need a certain strategy to win the game, and oftentimes part of that strategy is getting hazard damage on specific Pokemon. If we were to go through SSOU, we could find a whole slew of Pokemon that are punished upon switching into hazards. Offensive Pokemon like Azumarill, Bisharp, Corviknight, Dragapult, Excadrill, which can remove them, Ferrothorn, Hawlucha, Hydreigon, Kommo-o, Magearna, etc. All these Marowak, Alola, all these Pokemon are very much susceptible to hazard entry, and taking that damage can help limit them. force them to go for certain patterns of play or restrict them from going from other patterns of play, which could lead to them making progress. And really analyzing that from the get-go and getting hazard control to be part of your game plan that you could use in your favor is really important, because you're doing a lot of progress with stall. You're making a lot of progress with stall at team preview when you analyze, okay, what they could have to be a threat to my team and how I can take them out. What do I need to preserve and what can I maybe play a bit more risky? Or what do I need to do to make sure that I get into a winning position in the game? The fact of the matter is that stalled teams actually take a lot of forethought and precision to play. Piloting them at an optimal level could arguably be harder than any other archetype. In fact, I personally found mastering stall much harder than that of hyper offense. And I do find myself a very polished stall player due to more experience, so it's something that you can get a lot better at with experience, which is another reason why I believe experience is important. But anyway, on top of setting up hazards with the hazard Pokemon that I mentioned, there's also removal. Having sufficient removal is very important in past generations with stall. In SS, again, it was diminished a little bit thanks to heavy-duty boots and Ferrothorn being the really only common spiker, with things like Greninja not being in the game, Skarmory seeing dwindling effectiveness due to Corviknight giving competition and other factors in the metagame, etc. But with that said, having a proper defogger or rapid spinner or a core with multiple removers is still of the utmost importance, as letting your Chansey take 12.5% every time it comes in to check Magearna, and then what if it volt switches a couple times? All of a sudden your whole team is in range of Aura Sphere or Flare Cannon or Flash Cannon, and then you can get kills. It just takes a couple sequences with Rock setup. It really takes 1 or 2 turns. 12.5% hazards plus another 12% from Specs Volt Switch. Okay, you're down 75. Do that again. All of a sudden you're down to 50. Then all of a sudden Flare Cannon can 2-KO you or Aura Sphere can 2-KO you. That sequence you need to avoid happening. You need to be proactive in making sure those hazards are removed. And that is why we need to discuss A, our own ways of setting up hazards, and B, our ways of removing hazards. So let's get on into that first and foremost. So the primary hazard users on stall teams are, in my opinion, Chansey, Clefable, Ferrothorn, Powdon, Toxapex, and Extra. Now, this is not in a particular order, but I'd say roughly you see this Pokemon the most, but I don't think it's any indication of viability. For example, I view almost all of these Pokemon as more viable than Chansey right now, because Chansey is very much limited to stall in very niche balance teams. However, on stall teams, you could argue that Chansey is close to staple status due to how amazing it is in the special end. Now, Chansey is obviously a really polarizing Pokemon, but on stall teams, it is second to none when it comes to being a special sponge. It's able to help against things such as Dragapult special sets, especially if it has Toxic or Thunder Wave to cripple it. Nasty Plot Dragging lacking Roost, any Magearna set that lacks Trick or Draining Kiss, or Cancel It, I guess. It's really great against things like Nasty Plot Rotom Heat and Volcarona that lack Roost if it's not Toxic as well. I mean, you could go down the list and probably look for a couple other things. For example, if you were to go down to UU and see potential options that could be risen up to OU, you see things like Gengar, which you can Thunder Wave, or actually Gengar can do well against you, but if you have Thunder Wave on your Chansey, you could at least kind of negate that. Or Pokemon such as, wow, I'm kind of drawing a blank here, I'm not going to lie. I guess you should be able to withstand a couple of Centokias and break subs with Seismic Toss, but you can get flinched out. Alakazam that lacks Recover because Dazzling Gleam is more and more common. You can potentially do well against, but if they hit 2+2 Focus Blast, you can actually lose that as well. Really good against Magnezone, which is a huge problem to switch into for stall teams, which is worth noting as well. So yeah, I mean, I think the big things are the fire types like Rotom Heat and Volcarona, as well as Hydreigon and Magearna. So I think that's worth noting. On the top of this, it actually has decent physical durability. For example, it can stomach 2 hits from Excadrill, or it can withstand a physical assault from Pokemon such as, I don't know, let's say Cinderace lacking high jump kick because they're all running Gunk Shot right now. You can tank 2 hits from them even if they're adamant. But of course you have to watch out because a U-turn puts you into a kill range. But yeah, and Chansey also has a very good ability in Natural Cure. While it is taking damage from Stealth Rock and Spikes, Natural Cure lets it switch into status moves like Will-O-Wisp and Toxic and live to tell the tale in the long haul. It can also be a Cleric with moves like Heal Bell or Aromatherapy. And on top of that, of course, we're talking about hazards here. It's a great Stealth Rock setter. It's able to cripple things like Mandibuzz and potentially just force sequences that are pretty obvious with other defoggers and removers. And you can Seismic Toss things like Extra for Chip as well, etc. And of course, Soft Boiled, Toxic. You can run Teleport, I suppose. Wish are options as well. We'll get into that more later. As for next up, we have Clefable. Clefable is a great addition to stall teams because it's Magic Guard, so it's not only used to hazard entry, but also residual damage such as Toxic Poison or Burn from Will-O-Wisp or Scald. And on top of that, Sand or Hail damage is not affected either. It can also use a lot of utility moves such as Knock Off, Trick, and Wish, as well as Encore. So those are all very viable on certain teams. Personally, I think Wish is amazing on stall due to the fact that it grants your team increased longevity. While it does only have 16 PP, the fact of the matter is that getting 16 roughly, 190, 200 HP wishes to insert other Pokemon in your team, like say Toxapex, is really amazing. So definitely can something to take advantage of. And it also gets access to Stealth Rock, and it's a fine Stealth Rock. It actually does well against Mandibuzz, which is the premier defogger right now. Next up, we have Ferrothorn. This spread is not having a nature, unfortunately. I don't know why that didn't work out, but with that said, we still have Ferrothorn here. It's a really great Stealth Rocker and option on stall teams. In fact, with Spikes, if you're on a different Stealth Rocker, it's also a superb Spike setter. In some matchups, it's really great. In others, it can be taken advantage of. But Leech Seed is a great option on teams that negates lack of recovery, although you definitely do want to consider pairing this with a Wish user as well. It's great against Pokemon like Choice Magearna, lacking Focus Blast, or electric types like Zeraora, and more likely to encounter things like water types. It's able to set up all over bulky waters and then receive wishes, which is great. And it can even wall things like, rain teams with Barraskewda. It's got to predict you in close combat. Or Kingdra, its stabs aren't going to be able to break you even if it's physically defensive, and so on and so forth. Beyond that, we also have Hippowdon, which is just a really good physical wall, which unfortunately is also missing a nature in this import. But with that said, Hippowdon is a premier physical wall and a great switcher. Switch into some Pokemon like Cinderace and Bisharp in this tier, which can be problematic to stall teams, especially if they lack an unaware Quagsire. Also good against Bisharp as well, against Excadrill as well, which can run Sword Dance and Moldbreaker, which can break through things like unaware Quagsire and Clefable. And because of the less common nature of steel types like Skarmory and Corviknight that could defog, having Hippowdon with Mandibuzz is almost mandatory on some variants of stall, unless you're packing something like Mandibuzz with Foul Play and Max Physical Defense, although stall teams oftentimes like running Knockoff. So, yeah, it's definitely something to keep in mind. Toxic I prefer over Whirlwind, but of course it can work on either team, and you definitely want to max out Physical Bulk Cup versus things like Urshifu, and, aforementioned Excadrill, and even some other Pokemon like Zeraora as well, although, with Grass not really never being used anymore because Seismitoad fall off the earth. That's worth noting as well. Beyond that, we also have Toxapex, which is Toxic Spikes. It's a pretty fundamental Pokemon that to stall teams that's honestly bordering staple status as well. It is an amazing ability regenerator, which we're going to get into later, but Toxic Spikes is an option there. Moldbreaker Drill, where it's more of a balanced and bulky offensive Pokemon, it can be used as an option on stall teams, and this spread in particular lets you live a Specs Magearna or a Sphere 100% of the time, although I might just be banning a Pokemon called Magearna in the very near future if things come to fruition. I might just be doing that. This might just be a spoiler, and you guys might just want to check out a video in anywhere from 1 to 2 days in the future, where I might just be outlining some things that we might be changing in the SSU metagame. So maybe stay tuned for that, guys. Just a little foreshadowing that could or could not come into fruition in the near future. Just taking a chill. Anyway, these are like 6 premier hazard setters on stall teams. However, there are other hazard setters for Stealth Rock, Spikes, and so on and so forth. So let's get into them. The first one is a Spiker and Skarmory. It still is pretty solid on stall teams. Never mind. Corviknight is not a Spike setter. I'm completely right now. Sorry about that. But Skarmory is a great physical wall in this metagame, despite it definitely losing some steam from where it was at its peak form in Generations 3, 4, and 5. Of course, it still has some shortcomings like weakness to fire types and Magnezone, but it has a great bulk on the physical end, and it can run Body Press, which is an amazing tool that was granted this generation, which I think renewed some viability after seeing even bigger lull last generation. It can run Defog and Spikes, which is cool, as it's able to help control both ends of the hazard spectrum. It also has access to Stealth Rock, which can come in handy as well. This is just a completely sample set. You don't have to use this necessarily, but it's worth noting. Next up is Jirachi, which has a nice matchup against Magearna spec set. If you don't mind taking a trick and potentially being volted all over, running it with a ground type or an electric immunity is pretty solid, though. It's also really good against non-Shadow Ball Alakazam, which really doesn't see much usage whatsoever. And Pokemon like Togekiss, especially if you're on a little more speed, and the Municlus that could be problematic to your stall teams that we'll get into later. There are also other options that are a bit more balance-centric, such as Como-O, Rhyperior, Seismitoad, and Weezing Galar. All these Pokemon have niches on stall team due to the fact that they wall a particular set of Pokemon. For example, Como-O is great at pivoting into Wicked Blow from Urshifu. It's superb against Bisharp. It can sponge a couple hits from Cinderace potentially. It also can 1v1 things like Excadrill, and it can deter utilization of Pokemon on the physical end that can be problematic, like Zeraora and Tyranitar, which you don't see as much as Pokemon like Urshifu or even Excadrill right now, but still are noteworthy. Rest in peace, Tyranitar Zoyustin, by the way. But yeah, you can run more bulk if you're not worried about the short force worth. The spread just outruns that, so you can't get flinched out. And then Rhyperior is great for Cinderace and Rotom Heat. It also has some other things it walls and gives you a Volt Switch immunity, but I don't really see it much on stall teams. It and Seismitoad are just kind of fringe Pokemon that are good for the electric immunity, and in Seismitoad's case also the water immunity, whereas in Rhyperior's case just massive physical bulk. They have niche on stall teams, but they definitely require wish support. It's pretty much mandatory with either of them, and even then, I prefer them as more fringe options on balance than I do fringe options on stall teams. And last but not least, the only true Urshifu counter, Weezing Galar. We might also be acting on Urshifu. I'm less sure on that, but definitely stay tuned for that. A lot of exciting news coming up, so it's going to be important that we get that out there as well. But anyway, yeah, it's a really great answer to Urshifu, and it can also do well against things like Libero Cinderace, huge power Azumarill, etc. So, Rillaboom is great against as well. There are just a lot of practical things to neutralizing gas. And of course, you can run other moves beyond these. We'll get into that later, in fact, but this is just a completely sample set. Anyway, these are the main hazard setters that you'll see on stall teams. Notice that I've neglected Pokemon like Mew or Necrozma, which definitely have niche stealth rockers, as well as some more offensive setup options, such as Lead Mamoswine, and I guess, as we said, Mew before. These Pokemon are viable hazard setters, but you won't find them on stall due to various assortment of characteristics. If you have more questions about this, definitely let me know in the comment section below, or any questions at any point in this video, let me know in the comment section below, because I'd love to address any questions that you guys have. But I only have so long to make this video, and we're already at the 16-minute mark, and we are already only through like the first little section here. So considering we have like 3 replays to go through, plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different categories to go through, we definitely want to keep the ball rolling here. So next off, as we're already on the topic of the hazard game, we're going to go ahead and segue into hazard removal. Of course, the premier removal in the current metagame right now is Defog Mandibuzz. Personally, I prefer knockoff over foul play on stall teams, and we actually saw it highlighted today by Exum Raptor against Marco P, netting a one-shot against a Nasty Plot Alakazam with a specially defensive Nasty Plot Mandibuzz on his stall team, which was a pretty cool option. It was definitely interesting to see that showcased by Raptor. But yeah, foul play, of course, is viable if you are strapped for a Swords Dance extra answer. So, for example, if you don't have an Unaware Quagsire or a Skarmory slash Celesteela, oh my god, not Celesteela, no, slash Corviknight. It's literally on the screen, guys. Celesteela is not even in the game. What am I saying? But yeah, no, you can definitely adapt it to your team. This is a set I personally want to balance spread-wise. Let you live Magearnas, Flare Cannon, and also outrun things like Choice Band Tyranitar and Aegislash. You can also run Speed for Bisharp if you're running foul play, and you're vulnerable to that as well. Just plenty of options. You could also run Brave Bird for fighting types and Volcarona, or Toxic for Volcarona, catching Rotom Heat and Zero Aura to switch in. So yeah, definitely on a lot of options. Toxic's also good against Stealth Rock setters like Powdon and Como-O as well. Yeah, anyway, Skarmory, as we saw before, can function as a spiker, but also a defogger. But we touched on that a lot already. Good physical wall. So let's get into Mantine, a Pokemon that is seeing a bit of a renewed lease in OU in terms of viability this generation, as it's superb against Volcarona. And with this bulk, it can tank Power Balls from Cinderace, or you can stomach things like Body Press from Como-O with ease. And with the speed, it also can be a counter to Belladrum Azumarill, as you could haze the +6 and outrun it with the speed. And you already have a massive amount of special bulk, leaving you easily checking things like Volcarona. So therefore, you can invest in physical bulk to help circumvent the poor physical defense on the base amount. So yeah, moving beyond that, Corviknight is pretty much less effective Skarmory defensively, that has more of an offensive presence that can work on stall teams due to the fact that it has pressure. You can run U-Turn, Brave Bird. Both upsets can technically be a win condition on stall teams, etc. But ultimately, I prefer Skarmory on stall teams. It does give you an option of running special defense, though, Corviknight does, as that could be a good answer to Nasty Plot Alakazam. But you have to be careful in proceeding with that, of course, as well. Next up, Rotom Heat and Excadrill are also removal options on stall teams, while they do have other niche in the metagame. Of course, Rapid Spin Excadrill is superb. Personally, I love it with Toxic to hit things like Mandibuzz and Hippowdon. However, you can run it with Stealth Rock or Swords Dance, or even Protect Leftovers if you're feeling that as well on your stall team. And Defog Rotom Heat, while it doesn't match up amazingly against a lot of Stealth Rock inducers, stealth setters like Toxic, Hippowdon, and Como-O, it does really well against Pokemon like Ferrothorn, which is cool to their spikes. So yeah, that coupled with the fact that it's a good answer to things like Togekiss, which are oftentimes problematic as it can flinch through unaware Pokemon, and you don't always have a faster Steel or a Rock type like Rhyperior, so yeah, it's definitely worth noting that as well. Anyway, moving forward beyond this, there's other removers of hazards in the metagame as well, and we're going to go through them here. Weezing Galar, again, it's a good Urshifu answer, and it has some nice practical applications of its ability. It can run Defog as well as or Toxic Spikes, but this is just a sample set again. Other moves such as the Corrosive Gas, Sludge Bomb, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, I guess, are all viable on it as well. You can go on and on and on. Toxic Spikes, yeah. Togekiss is kind of a fringe one. It's decent against Urshifu, and with the spread, you could outrun a handful of things, but ultimately, it's not a super common defogger. Same goes for Rapid Spin Avalugg. It's amazing physical wall. It's able to withstand hits from even the strongest physical attackers, for example, like a Stomach, a Choice Banded, Adamant, or Shifu's close combat with ease. And on top of that, it's a great answer to Pokemon like Physical Zeraora, or it could even live a +2 Iron hit from X-Drill and demolish it with Body Press in return. But unfortunately, it's got pretty low special defense, and it's relying a lot on Body Press to do damage, so it's not great, but it definitely saw some action on Stall Team's last generation. I wouldn't be shocked to see it surface here and there this generation as well. Defog Scissor special defense is mainly just there for Alakazam and, more importantly, Magearna. It's an okay remover, I guess, but I personally wouldn't use it. Volcarona is a Pokemon you'll see in a number of roles on Stall Teams. One of them, this generation, is a defogger with heavy-duty boots. It enables it to come in on hazards and remove them, doing fairly well against some setters like Ferrothorn, especially if you avoid the knockoff. However, it does struggle against Pokemon like Toxic Hippowdon and Como-O, as well as the sporadically seen Stealth Rock Tyranitar or Stealth Rock X-Drill, which you can't really switch into, and it's slower than. Struggle Bug is really cool, as you could kind of handle things like Combine Clefable and Combine Magearna, due to the fact you've got 32 PP that always lowers special attack by 1, and you're forcing damage, which eventually forces recovered PP. So keep that in mind as well, but it can potentially run a move like U-Turn, or even Quiver Dance, or Toxic. So yeah, there's a lot of options with this. And then we also have Magic Bounce too, which can run Toxic over Defog, but if you're scared of getting Mold Breaker, Stealth Rock Drill, or other hazard setup that's when you're like not switched in, you can run Defog on it as well, I believe. I haven't actually used this personally myself, but it seems like it's a viable option. I've only used Atu with Toxic, but yeah, that said, Magic Bounce regardless makes it a decent remover, I suppose. Teleport is a cool addition as well. Anyway, one part of Stall Teams that I think a lot of people underestimate when they're newer to the style is like, oh, we're just going to wall all their Pokemon and eventually we'll win the game, right? Well, walling out their Pokemon is one thing, but how do you win the game if you just wall out their Pokemon? Can they not just switch around infinitely, or can they not eventually set themselves up in the positions where if they get lucky, they win the game due to getting a critical hit on the wall at the right time or a secondary effect on the wall at the right time, but not actually compromise their own chances of lasting out longer than your team? Can they just switch around with their Toxapex and Clefable all day? So, moreover, you need to have not only an ability to have a game plan against those Pokemon, as we alluded to, with things like hazards and our own win conditions, which we'll get to in a minute, but also enough longevity to where we can feel out their teams and find out what we need, and also just potentially outlast more flimsy teams like Hyper Offense as well. So therefore, abilities like Regenerator, which grants you 33% of health upon switching out, or Magic Guard, which means that you're immune to things like Spikes, Stealth Rock, Toxic Spikes, poison damage, burn damage, and on top of that, also weather from hail or sand residuals. So yeah, Magic Guard and Regenerator are superb. The primary Regenerator Pokemon in the tier right now are Toxapex, Slowbro, Amoonguss, and Tangrowth, and they're roughly used in that order. You could argue that the number 2 through 4 options are all kind of neck and neck, whereas Toxapex is just a clear step ahead. But yeah, they're all very viable options in the metagame, in my opinion. Beyond that, we also have Clefable, which is a Magic Guard abuser, and Nicholas, which has both abilities. These are just some sample sets that can function in Stall Teams. I'm not going to go into each Pokemon individually, but I'm going to brush on them. I guess I am going to go into them individually. I'm just not going to go and write a college thesis on all of them. So Toxapex with Regenerator is really great at just coming in and out. It doesn't even necessarily waste PP, but you can also force stab some things with Scald, Toxic, or potentially knock them off, etc. And Haze is great for setup sleepers like Magearna and Volcarona and Clefable, so a lot of that going for it. In addition to that, Slowbro is a great option with heavy duty boost, Regenerator, and Teleport, as it just grants you almost endless stream of free switches, which can go a long way in practice, in my opinion. And it's a great physical wall for Pokemon such as, say, Cinderace, so definitely something worth keeping in mind. Beyond that, we also have Amoonguss, which is really good at pivoting into Urshifu initially, and also checking electric types like Zeraora, or it can also resist water types, which can go a long way in a water-heavy metagame. Tangrowth is one of the premier answers to things like Excadrill, Bisharp, not so much, but Excadrill, and check Urshifu, and it does really, really well against Rillaboom and Zeraora. Sorry, I misspoke. It can beat Bisharp with Sleep or Earthquake 2 killing, but if it switches in on a Swords Dance, Bisharp can 2 kill you with Iron Head into with knockoff and the Iron Head, and if it's at full health, it could live in Earthquake after Rocky Helmet. So you got to be careful there. It could be some rolls in your favor, or potentially not get flinched out, but yeah, it's not like a hard counter to Bisharp. Anyway, we also have Magic Guard Clefable. It can just do everything pretty much. It sums it up. I like this set in particular. It lives a plus 2 acrobatics from Malucha, and on top of that, it also lives 2 stab attacks from even an Adamant Choice Band or Shifu, and Wish plus Knockoff are amazing tools to not only increase your team's longevity, which is kind of the theme here, but also decrease the team that you're facing's longevity due to the presence of Knockoff, removing things like leftovers or potential boosting items that give them more of leeway offensively. Reuniclus can run Regenerator or Magic Guard. Personally, I don't believe it's the best option on assault teams, but it can function as a win condition or a pivot. It's worth noting, and it can be applied practically in some cases. Of course, longevity is not all there is to it, though. While you want to last as long as they're a team or potentially more than them, there are games where you can be pressured, and having a win condition is a very viable strategy on stall teams. Of course, hazards and strategic pivoting can function as a win condition on these teams, a la GSC. I guess that's kind of the first thing that prompted to me, and some stall teams used last generation, but having win condition on these teams can also go a long way. Pokemon like Calm Mind, Clefable, and Reuniclus, and Heavy Duty Boots Volcarona with Roost and Physical Defense actually fit into the narrative because they fulfill other roles on stall teams, such as increasing longevity or being able to wall certain Pokemon, in Volcarona's case, Magearna. But they aren't as naturally fittable, as natural fits as others, so you definitely have to cater your stall team specifically to their win conditions and being able to cover or potentially even double cover Pokemon that are problematic to them setting up repeatedly. For example, with this Clef set, if you're not running Thunderbolt and instead you're running Flamethrower as it displays here, definitely important to have Toxapex covered with your team and make sure you can pivot into the status repeatedly, not be annoyed, potentially even do something to take advantage of it, like having a random Pokemon with Block and the ability to PP stall it out or progressively defeat it, which is also worth noting. Reuniclus is a bit less support dependent, but it is very vulnerable to Urshifu, which is something that you definitely want to make sure you cover on your stall teams, making things like physically defensive Tangrowth, Amoonguss, Hippowdon, and Weezing, Galar, all decent options in my opinion. Volcarona is great against things like Magearna, and also has a couple of handy-dandy resistances. You can run a bulky Quiver set, which is very dangerous to some teams. Of course, missing out on the bug coverage is really unfortunate against Pokemon like Status, Slowbro, Nasty Plot, Alakazam, I suppose, although a bit less so. And it's really just Psychic types like that. Psychic itself hits Pokemon like Toxapex, which is superb, and Flamethrower, of course, is good universal stab otherwise. But yeah, that's worth noting. I guess that Bug Buzz also is good against specific water types like Slowbro, but yeah, it's also a Psychic type. So anyway, it can be used. Magearna can run a whole slew of sets. You can run those cheesy Iron Defense sets as well, or it can run like Common Paint set like this with defense-oriented. It's good to help sponge attacks from other fairies and also resist a whole slew of types, but it's not the best style this generation on stall in my eyes. It does have utility moves like Heal Bell, Volt Switch, Pan Split, and Trick, but yeah, there are other things you could use as well. And last but not least, Nasty Plot plus Heal Bell Togekiss and Curse plus Wrath Snorlax are very viable options as well, but they're only really used in specific capacities, so definitely be careful when utilizing those Pokemon as your primary or sole win conditions on stall teams, as they will lead to some matchups in which you are not going to be able to make progress with them, and you're just resorting back to your longevity and making sure you could eventually methodically outplay them with the helpful aids of Status and Stealth Rock or Spikes to help kind of, uproot your progress and increase the game's pace. So yeah, that's definitely worth noting as well. But beyond that, there are also other things that we definitely want to examine. For example, opposing teams have setup options such as Hyper Offense that could potentially pose a threat to you, especially if your initial answer to those setup options could potentially be chipped off by like a teammate, which is kind of how a lot of offensive cores work. You break the wall with one, and then you sweep the team with other Pokemon that's kind of walled by that wall. Because of that, having anti-setup options is a great mid-ground, and being able to handle them while also fitting Pokemon on your team that could provide defensive merit as well. For example, Quagsire, while being historic NU or even lower Pokemon, is actually a very viable stall asset in OU due to the fact that it has Unaware, but also is able to check things like Rotom, Heat, and Cinderace this generation, as well as non-Grass Net Zero Aura, which gives it a lot of practical application on the defensive end. While obviously I would not be using a Gastrodon this generation, if not for Unaware. Unaware enables a very practical side of it that helps it wall a whole slew of Pokemon that are very common within the metagame right now. On top of that, we also have Toxapex, which is currently missing in nature, but Toxapex can run Haze. It's not Unaware like the first two Pokemon, and we're going to get over to Clef in a minute, but Haze is definitely a very interesting option on Toxapex. It helps versus things like Magearna, Volcarona, and the occasional bulk up or Shifu, or you can even stay in on Belladrum, Azumarill, and Haze into that. Dragon Dance, Dragapult, you name it. It does pretty well against setups in general, which is cool. Of course, there's also Unaware Clefable, which can run a physically defensive set. What I don't like about this is the fact that it's suddenly vulnerable to every single form of status and hazards in the world, and I think that opens up to a lot of issues. But I did a video on Unaware vs Magic Guard Clef and my grievances with facing a surplus of Unaware Clefable on the ladder, so definitely be sure to check that out if you're more curious on that subject. But anyway, Ditto is also a great measure against hyper-offensive teams in particular, because you're able to take their side of Sleeper and replicate it, but be faster and locked into a move. So versus certain Pokemon, like say a Bulk Up Cinderace or a Belladrum Azumarill, it can come in handy for sure. Although it is more of a situational pick, I think that Ditto has a lot of merit on stall teams or in general in this metagame. Moving forward, there's also Unaware Pyukumuku, the forgotten Unaware Pokemon, but it's forgotten for good reason. It doesn't actually learn any attacks. It's just really easy to play around for high-level players, and ultimately, I don't think Pyukumuku as a particularly serious option at OU, but I think it has some fringe viability as a third wheel of the Defog trio. And last but not least, another Haze user in Mantine. We already touched on it as a potential defog option that's really good against Volcarona and has the ability to run investment in physical defense, as it already has a superb special defense stat. Because of that, I think it's just, a good option in the metagame right now, but not great. It has a lot going for it defensively, and heavy duty boots is cool. You can also run, Haze to help against things like Belladrum Azumarill, which it naturally runs, and virtually counter Volcarona. So yeah, there are anti-setup options as well, such as Unaware, Haze, Ditto, etc. And beyond this, as I just fly off my screen. Oh boy, sorry about that, guys. There are also other options that are worth noting as well. I didn't complete the stats on them, but just some kind of rough concepts. We have Pivot Magearna with Early Impulse, which lowers special attack by 2. So it's basically a superior Confight. It's really cool against Pokemon like Alakazam, opposing Magearna, etc. You could even run Assault Vest on Magearna on stall if you pair it with Wish. Although there are some redundancies between it and Blissey or Chansey, but at least it can tank tricks and other things like knockoffs with a bit more viability in the long haul. So it's a fair option as well. Gastrodon is great against a whole slew of Pokemon. For example, it does well against Pokemon like Cinderace, Zeraora, Rotom Heat, potentially Volcarona. You could 1v1 Excadrill in all likelihood. Yeah, all this taken advantage of by Urshifu, Togekiss, Rillaboom, etc. There's a lot of pros using Gastrodon. Unfortunately, it's hard to justify in a metagame with Slowbro and Toxapex, but yeah, I think it has a lot going for it. Next up, we have Azumarill, which can run a Perish Trap set with Sap Sipper. It's a really cool application of Pokemon that tends to be used with a bit more of a reckless offensive win condition in Breaker. So I think this is definitely something that has merit. It's really cool at trapping Pokemon like Ferrothorn and Toxapex, which Ferrothorn, keep in mind, can't damage due to Sap Sipper. It's also a counter to Rillaboom, which can go a long way. Last moves can be like Rest or Toxic or, knock off, whatever you want. Play off even to hit a specific set of Pokemon like Hydreigon, which you then counter. So yeah, it's an option as well. Heavy Duty Boots Teleport Blissey is kind of like Chansey, but you lose a significant amount of physical bulk. You retain the ability to survive without an item in the long haul bulk-wise, however. And it's also able to abuse Teleport a lot more because it's immune to hazards. It's really cool in teams that are only able to fit one more flimsy or less consistent remover. Such as, say, if you're running Excadrill with Rapid Spin as your only hazard remover, then it's cool. It can, of course, run Stealth Rock over Toxic, but the rest of the moves is pretty much mandatory, I think. We also have Stealth Rock Bronzong, which is good, I guess, against Magearna and Sand Excadrill and so on and so forth, but it's not too great in the metagame. I'd say you try it out, but personally, I'm not convinced. It just has a rough niche on stall teams due to the fact that it has a very practical set of things that it walls. And last but not least, we have Vaporeon, which is great against Cinderace and has access to Flip Turn now, which, Wish, Scald, Flip Turn, or Haze, or Heal Bell plus Protect. It has some rough viability as a physical wall on stall teams as well, in my opinion. It gives a water immunity, which can come in handy against rain as well. Barraskewda basically invalidated here. Of course, though, it's still Vaporeon. It probably wants heavy duty boots over leftovers, in all honesty, to soak up things like Toxic Spikes and Stealth Rock and Spikes and whatnot. But yeah, it's okay, but definitely not superb, in my opinion. Anyway, thankfully, we've gone over every single element of stall teams that, in my opinion, is likely to encounter. You, of course, may see other Pokemon on more fun stall teams on the ladder in particular, but maybe not so much in tournaments. But either way, now that we understand what stall teams are made of and how to build or construct them in a sense, because yes, we want to tie in all these things. Well, of course, covering the whole team building checklist of normal checks and counters to Pokemon. I think now that we've gone this far, I definitely want to go into specific gameplay. So give me 1 second, guys. So this here is my crowning achievement with stall, I guess. Well, actually, I went 2-0 in this tournament, Smogon Snake Draft 2, with stalled teams, as well as winning a couple other official capacity games with stall teams, such as Smogon Tour semifinals against Well IOU back a couple years ago. But This is a game in SMOU where I used a stall team with Mega Aggron, Chansey, Zapdos, Buzzwole, Mew, and Quagsire. And I faced a team with a Trapper for Aggron, plus Regenerator Pokemon in Tornadus plus Regenerator Pokemon in Slowbro, plus a Rest Talk Zygarde, plus an Unaware Magikarp Clefable that had laser focus to crit through things. And I managed to outlast this. The key to stall is persistency and finding little alleyways to just, make sure they waste their offensive firepower and their ammunition to potentially break through your team before they're really able to get the most out of it. Sometimes making aggressive plays with stall is of vital importance, and I was able to display that in this game where I kind of just kept the ball going for like 600 turns, and eventually I was able to outlast my opponent. It was kind of a controversial game as my opponent maybe made some mistakes, but ultimately I think I did a pretty damn good job just keeping the pressure up for as long as humanly possible, lasting 616 turns. Of course, though, I'm not going over a game in SMOU, and I'm definitely not going over a game that's 600 turns over. Do not worry about that. We're going to go right into some games that I played in the ladder. The first one is between me and user CBB Get a Trophy. We're using the Dredigon team. It does have some great options against all teams such as Life Orb, Nasty Black Gengar, and Marowak Alola, but with Regenerator, Slowbro being able to teleport out and just switching on things like Toxapex and Chansey to let that in, that's also really important. Having a pivot like this is super important. So you're going to see how I use that pivot to not only just sponge like potential status and weak attacks, but then use it to get out. Teleport on Clefable also does something similar, or just having a slow Volt Switch or U-turn or like Corviknight can do the same. And it's just really cool you could abuse that. So this is going to be a great example of how, we have flimsier Pokemon like Gengar, Dredigon, and Marowak that are breakers, so we can't switch them in directly. We can abuse the context of our team to get them in safely. So right off the bat, they lead Toxapex. I lead Marowak Alola trying to get rocks up, but I know I want to get out of the way, so I go Slowbro here. I'm like, okay, I want to see what it's doing. It knocks off my boots, which is unfortunate. And then it goes for Toxic, which is also lame, but I get a Thunder Wave off on it, so all of a sudden it can potentially be Free Turn City. And seeing as he's Toxic plus Knockoff plus, plus Scald, I know he's not going to be Haze, which is cool, or Toxic Spikes, which is also cool. So I go Crook, and I just try to threaten. I knock off the Boots and Mandibuzz, which is honestly just as much as I need because I can get rocks up now and threaten it a bit more, potentially. Anyway, U-turn, and now I'm just trying to generate momentum. I have my Corviknight in here, and I believe it's U-turn. Yeah, so it's U-turns here, so that lets me get in my Dredigon with his Gunk Shot. And all of a sudden, it's key to have, potential elements of surprise, or even if you play a game and they know your sets, potentially surprising them with the sequences you go for. Maybe make the same sequence a couple times that's safe, and then take a risk once you've lured them into a false sense of security. This is called conditioning. Now, in this game, I didn't have to condition the opponent because I had a surprise set that they didn't account for. Personally, in my opinion, the opponent should have went for something like Toxapex here, or even Quagsire here, to wall any potential option I was going for, because I was never going for a Dragon move into this, so he couldn't break the Quagsire. But yeah, he stayed in here because he didn't know what this did, and the element of surprise worked. Now, using surprise sets to lure specific stall things are cool, but you have to keep in mind that your surprise sets just can't be a random lure to a random Pokemon. It has to have some context, and you have to play it right as well. It's definitely a lot of work, but it has an ultimate reward of removing a Pokemon that your team needs removed. Removing Clefable in this game frees up my team a lot, as he can't pivot around and retain momentum throughout the entirety of the game, and on top of that, his main status absorber is removed, which can come in handy for Slowbro as well, and forcing it to get in and teleport out against more things in more situations as well. So one element of beating stall teams is having a lure. However, the game's still not over here. Let's just go through it a little bit more in detail. For example, he goes Chansey, so I go Gengar, and I'm like, okay, you can't touch me, so I'm just going to Nasty Plot up. And then I'm like, okay, with that out of the way, I can just kind of mow through his team, and I'm able to do that. And the fact of the matter is that this game was largely won due to matchup, but I think it's worth noting that using your pivots like Slowbro, which helped me get things in before, is really important. And on top of that, using surprise value to your advantage when facing bulk your course can go a long way. So if you have new ideas that help attack your team against stall teams, and they have enough practical reassurance in your mind, then definitely try them out and see how they do. And as for using stall teams, you definitely have to be uber conservative around potentially versatile Pokemon, and sometimes playing around them can be quite awkward and even limiting or restrictive to the playstyle. Of course, the best players can look at team preview and say, oh, this looks like it has this, or the team's more vulnerable to this than I thought, so therefore it might have this set. And that type of analysis can go a long way towards benefiting you in winning games. But it can only go so far, as some people use things that you can't really deduce from team preview, of course. As I win this game with Nasty Black Gengar ultimately, it was just really amazing in this matchup, so what can I say? However, there's more. With Hyper Offense, it's actually kind of more methodical in taking down stall. You want to start off the game by retaining hazards in a positive position. Sometimes you have to lead with something else and then double into your hazard setter, kind of just baiting a switch, and especially if you predict your defogger lead and you have a Pokemon that beats that. So yeah, it's definitely worth noting. You have to use Team Preview kind of as your guide in that regard. But here's an example. I'm playing against a guy named Theo, who's a really great stall player and a subscriber of mine, and one of the top UU and RU ladder players. Definitely check out his channel. I'm not going to do a full-on plug right now because I don't want to change dimensions and load up a channel that I didn't previously tab for. But yeah, I think it's called Theodore Mami or something like that, Theodore Mani. And I'll definitely be sure to continue to engage with him because I think he's a really great mind for the game. And if he continues to upload, then I'm probably going to plug him at some point in the near future. But yeah, maybe I'll try to remember him in my bio below and the movie description below. But yeah, anyway, he was using a stall with Lapras, which runs a Parrot Trap set. So stall teams themselves can adapt to the metagame and potentially use sets that can also have surprise value to your team. So you got to be careful about that as well. It does go both ways. But yeah, here I'm using Hyper Offense, so I just want to get it going. I want to get my lead in. Unfortunately, I don't feel comfortable doing that against Lapras because I was worried about it potentially being like an offensive set. Magirna's health isn't a big deal. See, having pivots is amazing. So you could come in, absorb the stats like that, and get the Volt Switch off, and now bring in your more threatening Pokemon. Now, what's cool is with hyper offensive teams, you either have a Pokemon that's going to force chip on a certain wall, which then opens up for another Pokemon, or you're going to have an outright breaker like Heracross. Heracross actually functions as both because it could break walls for Dragapult and Bisharp in particular. But if you don't have either of those, then you're not going to win against hyper offensive teams, and you're against stall teams with hyper offense. And hyper offensive teams are probably poorly designed, so definitely make sure you have that. Kind of try and vision the matchup when building hyper offense if you can. But anyway, I get the Heracross in against the Lapras, and it's already time to do some damage. He goes Skarmory. I'm like, hell no, I'm Swords Dancing. But I think I retreat here, scared of Brave Bird. No, actually, a close combat and bringing down a Sturdy. Never mind. And he goes for the Brave Bird. Yeah, so it's a trade, but that trade's fine with me because it opens up the game for Dragapult and Bisharp. So all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, I might have lost a primary stall breaker, but it was a worthwhile trade. And the post-trade momentum means I could get hazards up because one of his defoggers in Skarmory is gone, and his other one is abused by Bisharp as he can't use Body Press against me. So I go Swords Dance here, and I believe on this turn I go Magirna, knowing he's not going to go for the defog. He goes Foul Play, predicting that I stay in and trying to kill me, which is great because I can now go my Magirna and threaten it because he doesn't really know my full state yet. I double the switch to Bisharp here on the Talk Specs, and I believe I Swords Dance, knowing that he's Scald, but if he burns me, he burns me. And thankfully, he doesn't get the burn, which is amazing because I could force progress on this, and I kill it because it's especially defensive, which basically means that Dragapult's going to win the game here in the long haul if I don't win it with other Pokemon as well. He goes Foul Play here, and now he goes Chansey against it from the Mana Buzz, and I go Boom Burst, and I chip it, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I now know the damage. I go Bisharp and force progress as well, and now you just kind of have to get aggressive in toying away at damage and chip on the teams. And I know I could knock this off because he's not going to defog into me to give me the Defiant boost. I iron it here just in case he does that, and he does it, and that gives me the +2, which is amazing because I could kill him and potentially the Clefable as well. I get the kill here, which is amazing. I just can't let up momentum. He goes Clefable. I know it's unaware, but I get a crit, and he actually flinches, which is really unfortunate. But looking at this position here, it's kind of plausible that with this damage, it's probably in Steel Wing range. If not, then X-Bot can force it out. And then after that, I should be able to win the game with Dragapult, barring the Lapras set, because it should be able to handle Chansey as toxic as the worst case scenario could do. And despite the timer, I'm able to do really well. So that, plus the fact that I've got Encore and Explosion on the Magirna, so exploding on a non-recover turn could go a long way. And that also could leave things in Boom Burst range from X-Bot. So ultimately, everything worked together really perfectly here. And I was able to win the game just with Bisharp, but if I wasn't, I had backup, definitely options. It's just a key about kind of putting your performance in the right context, in the right order with these hyper-offensive teams against stall teams. And it's definitely something that I believe more people should try out on both ends of the spectrum. These are pretty cool play styles in my eyes. But yeah, Chansey's ungodly bulky, so it's able to live that Seismic Toss from like 90%, and X-Bot will finish out the game, but he forfeited. Yeah, anyway, next game here is against Minasa. I don't really know them too well, but using a team with Chansey, Skarmory, Hippowdon, and Clefable, so it's pretty stally here. And I'm using just Rotom Frost with like Breaker, Trick, Magirna. So we see here right off the bat, I'm just trying to claw away at every advantage and feel out his sets and how he plays, his patterns. So right off the bat, I go for Spore on the Hippowdon, which is cool because if I remove hazards with Drill, then actually I don't think I have defog on this one, damn. But anyway, I double the Magirna and I get a trick off on the Chansey promptly, which is amazing. It's part one of the game plan. So now, all of a sudden, Magirna and Dragapult and Rotom Frost are more free to do a lot more damage as I can go to Drill repeatedly on this, and even if it Seismic Tosses me, I can live. But he reveals Thunder Wave, which is even more amazing to come in on. So feeling in the driver's seat here. He goes Skarmory. I can get rocks up, which forces a defog potentially. I go for rapid spin in case he doesn't. I don't mind taking a body press, although I think he's going to go spikes or defog. So yeah, he goes spikes. And now I know I probably want to get out of the way here because of potential body press. He goes for that into my Rotom Heat. He does 71%, which is cool because I can now pain split that off and he's scared out against a really obviously HP invested Chansey. Well, as in, it's like, it doesn't necessarily have max HP, but it should have max HP, but it's just really has a lot of HP. So yeah. Anyway, now that it's locked into Seismic Toss, I can potentially just beat it 1v1 with Pain Splits and Nasty Plot plus Blizzard. So I'm able to secure that here, which is really cool. It opens up the game for Magearna and Dragapult as well. So yeah, and all of a sudden, he only has one Revenge Flow to me, so I can potentially Pain Split later on as well. I go to my Incineroar, not knowing what this Hydreigon would do. It just Dark Pulse. It looks like it's a bulky set with Defog and Leftovers after this turn. So yeah, I can take advantage of that with my momentum on Incineroar and simply go for a Whisk to force something to be crippled, barring Clefable, which I didn't anticipate coming in. He goes Skarmory, interestingly enough. I knock it off, he spikes, and then I just kill it. So actually, all of a sudden, this game looks really good. Incineroar has done a really good job, but ultimately, the win conditions are Rotom Frost, thanks to the cripple from Magearna and Magearna itself, and also Dragapult, the special end. Those Pokemon are doing really amazing in this game thus far. And yeah, I'm able to get the Rotom in and get a Pain Split off against Hippowdon. He actually stays in and then eventually dies after staying asleep one turn and then dying before he can wake up the next turn. So Blizzard connecting is pretty clutch. Now he goes Clefable, and I'm like, okay, I'll go Extra Drill. I just want to retain momentum and have favorable matchups in front of me at any point in time. This is going to let me get damage off or a rapid spin off, which can be a vital important as well in the long haul if this game revolves around more switching than I'd imagine, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. So he simply goes for a boosted Moonblast as I Iron Head. He's not even Flamethrower, I believe, so that makes matters a lot easier for me. I rapid spin here to be faster than the drill, and now I can just win the game. So all of a sudden, I believe I get a flinch here. But yeah, and then he can't kill a Dark Pulse, and then his Magearna lives, and he can't kill me because he misses Fleck Cannon. So yeah, a pretty lucky ending. It definitely would have been like a 4-0 or a 5-0, but it would have won the game anyway. It's just a point that game plans, like for example, forcing Trick with Magearna on Chansey means that other special sweepers like Nasty Plot Rotom can do well. Having that built-in synergy is huge. Being able to support your team against stall teams itself is just really valuable and definitely a really integral part of team building. But anyway, guys, we're just going to go ahead and sum up some points as we're approaching the 15-minute mark. Let me just reformat the screen real quick. So yeah, there are a lot of elements to stall teams. First and foremost, I believe that playing stall teams can help you guys go a long way, or even playing bounce teams and figuring out how to handle longer games, the right things to preserve, the right things necessarily not to preserve, how to play aggressively against them, and how to still not risk things at the right times. It's kind of something that first-hand practice can go a long way. But before you do that, you also need to understand how stall teams work. And so therefore, let's go over how they work. We have hazards. Controlling hazards is super important because you're going to be switching on the defensive a lot and you want to punish their switches. So having a reliable stealth rock setter and potentially reliable removal can go a long way, even in a generation with heavy-duty boots, but especially if you're stalling in prior generations. On top of that, having a path to victory, be it through hazards or a win condition of your own, can go a long way too. And also having sufficient longevity to last against balance teams and find outs, thus not leave yourself potentially risking losing to hacks repeatedly while they just sit there in the long haul and don't risk much is important as well. So longevity can go a long way. And also having options for opposing setups such as Unaware or Haze go a long way. And there are plenty of other options on stall teams as well. So this is kind of summing up the archetype of stall. As for beating opposing stall, definitely subscribe to the topic of timely aggression. When you notice they're making patterns, try and condition them into going through those patterns repeatedly, and then go on the aggressive and just kind of make the right sequences to break through their cores. It's really individual team and game specific, so definitely try out your teams against stall, and also try using stall so you can figure out how to break them with your teams or Pokemon that you like using. There's so many things out there. It's not just a universal, I'm going to pick one Pokemon to break stall. There are Pokemon that just individually can manhandle stall teams, don't get me wrong, but that's not something that you really want to do commonly. You want to be able to figure out a way to handle other teams while not having the collateral of deadweight Pokemon, and also handle stall just through you progressive outplaying. And I think that's of the utmost importance. But yeah, guys, this is the second Metagame Monday. It's covering the topic of how to beat stall, and it goes through the details of stall teams as well as some replays of me dispatching stall teams. I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day, guys. Enjoy Metagame Monday. Peace out, guys. Bye.